Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben, and back when I got my very first dual sport motorcycle, a 2008 DRZ 400, I thought that all I had to do was throw a leg over it, get on it, and ride. But if any of you have ever tried to ride a completely stock dual sport bike, you know that that's not really the way to go. The most important thing, in my mind anyways, for a dual sport motorcycle to change out on for the type of riding that I want to do, which is essentially being able to hop on either some twisty county roads or the highway, ride about an hour or so on the road so I can get to my trails, ride around on the trails for a couple hours, and then head back home in relative comfort and hopefully enjoying the paved portion just as much as I enjoy the dirt portion. So what I usually do is stick a pretty gnarly set of tires on. If you're running a little bit lighter bike, maybe you don't need to go quite as aggressive, and I know that sort of seems backward, but on these 350-ish pound motorcycles, the 701 that I've got just out of the frame included, they're so heavy and they're so big that I think they need that extra bit of traction to really be able to grip and support the weight of the bike in the corners and when you're leaning it around and stuff off-road. The last thing that I want is to get to a trail that I would really like to ride down and then feel like the tires are the limiting factor and won't let me go down it. Now, I'm not saying I'll be able to fly down it. I'm not saying that it'll be perfect. I'm not saying that it'll be easy. But there is nothing worse than being out on a trail and slipping and sliding around all over the place. It's just the best way to get the most out of a dual sport motorcycle. Now, if you're somebody that's going to spend a lot of time on the road, maybe you want something a little bit smoother that adds a little bit less vibration to already pretty thumpy bikes. But the thing is, if you're ever going to take it off-road, then I guarantee that there are going to be way more trails that you turn back on than ones that you want to go down, at least if you're in an area like I am where there's things like mud, and especially if you want to get out and ride in the wintertime, in the snow. I mean, you just need something that's going to hang on. And to me, a bike that doesn't hang on, that doesn't hold its own weight, and doesn't have enough traction just isn't a fun bike to ride. And I guess maybe that's just me. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree down in the comments. And if you guys are interested right now on the DR, it came with a set of Tusk D Sports when I traded my Gen 3 KLR for it. The XR, I'm trying out the Tusk Waypoint tires, which is a new tire this year. Definitely a more road-oriented tire than the D Sports are. The D Sports are rated at 80% off-road, 20% on, where the Waypoints are a 30% on-road, 70% off-road split. And I have to say that I think I agree. The back definitely seems to get plenty of traction. The front, I have felt slip a few times. This is a pretty big, top-heavy bike. You might have a little bit better luck on a sort of lower hanging DR650 where the center of gravity is just much lower. It just feels much more attached to the road and the trail no matter what tires you have on it and no matter where you are than the sort of higher up top heavy XR. The 701, I put a set of D Sports on. It came with a stock set of Continental TKC 80s, and as good as those tires I think probably are for somebody who doesn't really worry that much about off-road traction and mud and riding on snow and that sort of thing, for me personally, they just really didn't cut it. Where the D Sports have more than enough traction to handle all 70-ish horsepower that bike puts out, I'm much, much happier on that bike with those tires. Now, as much as traction from the tires is going to help keep you upright, let's face it, if you do any sort of single track riding or any sand riding, or especially, I guess, riding out in the snow and on the lake and that sort of thing, you're definitely going to end up in a situation sooner or later where the bike is on its side. And that's not something that you want to have in your head, because if you're always thinking about crashing, well, you're probably going to. You should be thinking about getting through it, moving on, and enjoying the ride. And if you're continually afraid that you're gonna bust your levers off or bust your hand on a tree, it's just not gonna make for a very good ride, which is why every single bike that I plan on taking off-road, I put a full wraparound aluminum core handguard on. I don't really care if they're bark busters. A lot of times now I will just go with the big Tusk D-Flex Adventure Guards. Rocky Mountain is, of course, my sponsor, so that may have something to do with the fact that they're on all my bikes, but to be honest, I like the big, tall profile that they provide. And as nice as bark busters look on bikes, they don't really provide that same amount of wind protection or protection from brush or anything like that. And honestly, these just seem to go on the bikes much better. I have much less problems with having to bend them. I like the fact that you're not using a wood screw to hold the actual cover portion on to the aluminum frame. There are actually threaded holes with just regular old machine screws. I've really just come to like them, and I would definitely highly recommend them. I like that they're now offering the aluminum parts in black. I think that really looks cool, especially on bikes like the DR and the XR that I've put a black Chubb bar on. The DR has the KTM bend bars on a set of ROX offset risers that convert from the stock 7/8 bar on the DR to the oversized 1 1/8 Chubb bar. The XR has the Moto Bend, which is just a little bit higher, and those are currently just on a set of straight Tusk big bar clamp risers. They just basically bring the bars up a little bit. They don't go backward or forward or anything. And then they, of course, take the stock 7/8 bar up to that 1 1/8 Chubb bar. And the reason that I like that bar so much is it's just a thicker bar. It's a little bit sturdier, which is good in a crash, but also just sort of shores the bars up a little bit, which means you get a little bit less vibration just because there is a bit more mass there. I think having the wraparound handguards also sort of helps that. It just calms the vibrations down in comparison to the very thin wall 7/8 bars. It's also nice just not to have that cross beam in the middle there to kind of get in the way of just the look of the bike or any accessories that you want to mount up there. So definitely things that I think sort of go hand in hand, but I think each has its own merit behind it, and it definitely makes me feel a little bit more at home on these bikes. The 701, I do have a set of the 1 1/8 to 1 1/8 ROX offset risers that bring the bars up and forward a bit. The KTM bend, I suppose, is what's on there. It's just the stock bars. KTM actually knows what type of bars to put on a bike to make it ride fairly comfortably on the road with enough sweep for wrist comfort and arm comfort, but also straight enough to really do a lot of good hard off-roading. I'm pretty darn happy with all of the bar locations and rises and bends that I've got on all three of these. Now, the funny thing is, if I would have made this video even just a year ago, I would probably be telling you that the next thing that I just can't live without is a big Tusk dry duffel on the back of the bike. And while I just really don't have a place to put one on either of these bikes yet, I'm not actually sure that I'm gonna end up putting one on the back. And that's mostly because I've sort of transitioned to the sort of must-have at my fingertips items being in a tank bag. I never ran a tank bag because I was always kind of worried that it would be in my way. It seems sort of obtrusive and maybe even a little bit unattractive. But honestly, now I've seen them on my bikes for so long, I've gotten so used to having my goggles, any sort of snacks, or any camera items that I need just right in front of me all the time that I don't want to have to get off the bike to get. It's just really nice to have that in front of me. And as much as I would say that I would not want to have to go without a tank bag now, in conjunction with that, the reason that I've been able to sort of get away from riding without a tail bag is something like this. Now, for a while, I was using a much smaller MSR hydration pack, which was essentially only big enough for the water bladder that's inside of here. And obviously that kind of got me away from having to put a water bottle in a tail bag. Being able to just quick take a sip from this rather than having to get off the bike is obviously much more convenient. I find myself drinking a lot more water because of that. But the other nice part about this is that you can basically just throw this on your back, and then you've always got your tools, you've always got any of the gear that you want to bring along with. I've always got items like the Tusk jump pack here. I can use this to actually just jumpstart one of my bikes if something goes wrong on a trip where if somebody leaves a key on or something like that. It's also got a flashlight on it, which of course might really come in handy at night in a bad situation. There's also just a regular old USB port on here so you can plug your phone in and charge it. I have ran my CarPlay unit off of one of these actually the last couple times that I've been out, since I don't have the wiring harness set up for that bike yet. I think I might also be moving the battery, which is why I'm sort of dragging my feet on that. And I've got to say that in comparison to the other bags that were more like a backpack or just a hydration pack, this thing feels much better balanced. It doesn't sort of hang to the back so much. It feels a little bit better distributed, and I definitely like that. It's sort of nice to have the weight on you, then it's not attached to the bike, then the bike still kind of feels light going from side to side. So I think it really just works out best for me. Now, of course, depending on where you're riding, if you know the area, maybe this is something that's completely obsolete for you. But for me, I just sort of like having the gadgets. I like knowing where the land borders are. And that's why every single one of my bikes, last season anyways, I would have an automotive Garmin Nuvi GPS. I had been picking them up off of eBay from anywhere from 20 bucks to up to like 60 for the largest one. Buying a used GPS like that just really seemed to make a lot of sense, especially since I could stick the VV mapping card in it, which covered Wisconsin and a couple of the neighboring states. It would show me snowmobile trails in the wintertime, and it would show me ATV trails in the summertime. So it was definitely nice to have all that information. Now that I've sort of had some experience with CarPlay technology in a car, when I got offered the CarPride CarPlay nav unit that I've got on the Honda, I just decided it was worth a try, and I'm not entirely sure that I'm ready to say that that is the future for me and that's where I'm going to go. It definitely is nice to have the big screen. It's nice to be able to have your phone connected to it and to have your Bluetooth headset connected to it. So far, I've only ever used Google Maps, which isn't really the best source for this type of riding in a vehicle. I mean, I think it works. It's nice to have the satellite imagery, but I think the new app that I'm going to be testing out the next time that I take the XR out, I think might make me like this a lot more. It still won't have all the ATV trails, but it seems like it has a lot of woods trails, which honestly for bikes that are not ATVs, I think makes a little bit more sense. So we'll see how that goes, but having some sort of navigation on the dash, not down below, not off to the side, but right up in front of you as high as you can get it, I think is the way to go. I don't really like using a phone, partially because it can destroy the camera on a nicer, newer phone with these bikes that put out a lot of vibrations especially. But just having all of that information, text coming in, calls coming in, it's just not really a good thing to be focusing on when you're on a bike. You should be paying attention to the road and the other drivers who are not paying attention to you and who are looking at their phones. But secondly, you should be enjoying the beauty that God created for us in front of you, not staring down to see, how many likes you got or, who's commented on your pictures. I think getting that as far out of your mind when you're riding, I think is important. I really like it anyways. And I think from a safety standpoint, I would assume that we could all agree that having just the map in front of you is the best option. So on this CarPlay unit, I did just turn all of those notifications off so it only shows me what I need to know. Having the big screen, I think probably is going to be nicer for just quick glancing down and then getting back to the road. But either way, I think having something that will show you the pertinent information to the type of riding that you're going to do is very important. Being able to hear that in your headset is really pretty cool as well. So definitely something that I like to have on all my bikes. I feel a bit under-equipped without. Of course, a lot of the trails that I ride, I can get through regardless of whether I have it or not, but that doesn't mean it's still not nice to have, especially if you're trying to find someplace new. Now this next one is something that I suppose I don't really like to admit to be honest, but I've sort of become accustomed to the more comfy side of things when it comes to seats, and as much as I did get along just fine on the Gen 3 KLR the entire time that I had that bike, I really did wish that I would have stuck a seat concept seat on it. Both of these bikes came with them, which was very strategic on my part. They were not necessarily the only selling point for these two individual bikes, but when I saw that both of these had the seat concept seats on them already, it definitely made me want them. When I picked up the 701, it did not. It had the worst seat I think that I've ever sat on, essentially made out of plastic with a plastic covering on it that was incredibly slippery. It just was not fun to ride on or to sit on or to do anything with. Even standing with that seat felt uncomfortable. So I guess as much as I hate to admit it, having a seat concept seat, especially on bikes like these that come off the factory floor as dual sports, not really meant to be ridden on the road for extremely long periods of time. If you're going to do that, I think it does make sense to spend the money to upgrade it. They're expensive, but that is the single biggest contact point on a bike, so why not have it be comfy and enjoyable to sit on. Now the next thing is something that I actually put off for a long time on the 701. Thankfully, just the other day, I decided enough was enough. I was just gonna get it done. I don't even know where I'm gonna fit it in as far as a video goes. But for whatever reason, every single bike I think that I've gotten so far, other than maybe the DR650, it's kind of cutting it close. Every single one, as soon as you get anywhere off of the road where the terrain is even slightly pliable, as soon as you put that side stand down and try to let the bike stand on it on its own weight, they all just seem to want to take a dirt nap, and it's so annoying. There have been so many times where I'm out riding with my dad or my buddy Jason, who's just sort of getting into dual sport riding, where I need to get off the bike quick. And of course, you know, if it's a life and death situation, you can just drop the bike and run. But if somebody just, you know, needs help getting a bike picked back up, that sort of thing, it's nice to be able to just throw the side stand down, put the bike on it, and jump off and go, where the majority of the time, especially the last time that I was out when it was raining with Jason on the 701, you have to find the perfect spot. You have to find a rock. When I'm washing the bikes in the backyard on the grass, they can't stand up for more than a few minutes once that ground gets saturated. It's so annoying. I don't know why manufacturers won't put slightly bigger foot pads on the kickstands. It's just, I don't know, it's very silly, it's really annoying. Luckily, there are lots of ways around it. On the XR, when I did the Hemisphere off-road lowering link, it also came with a shorter side stand that has a much larger foot. I definitely like that. It seems like it's been doing a good job on all the rides that I've had it on so far. The new tusk stand that I put on the 701, it seems like it does a much better job. They're usually pretty easy to install. This one especially, you basically tilt the bike over on its side, clean the stand up a bit, slap the bottom portion on, put the top over it, install the fasteners with some medium strength thread locker, lock the little set screws in place, and it shouldn't go anywhere on you. It definitely seems like it makes a big difference, at least in my driveway anyways. I don't think I'll have to worry about whether or not it's going to tip over. If we got just a light little bit of rain overnight, it'll actually stand up. So definitely something that I recommend, and I think really is kind of honestly a safety feature, because if you're especially new to dual sport riding and just getting off the road for the first time and you try to put that kickstand down and throw your leg over, the bike might try to tackle you. It's not something that anybody wants to deal with or should have to deal with. They should really, if it's going to be a bike that can go off-road, it should have a kickstand that could also keep the bike's weight up off-road. It's very silly. There are a few other things, of course, depending on the bike, like a skid plate. The XR here did not come with really a skid plate at all. It just came with a light little frame rail that sort of wrapped around it, which obviously is going to help, but not maybe completely take care of all your problems. And since I plan on taking this bike on, well, both of these bikes on single track, that's why I'm happy to have the aluminum skid plates on both of these. I do really like the fact that the Hemisphere one, along with the Camel ADV plate that I put on the Tenere 700 a couple years back, has a piece of plastic underneath it, which not only acts as a bit of wear protection, I suppose, but also will glide over things like rocks or logs or whatever much easier than powder-coated aluminum would. Of course, you don't have much for wind protection on them to start with, which is why I put the Hemisphere Off-Road Rally Dash on the XR. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do on the DR yet. I have been considering installing a full rally fairing. You can't do that on this bike because there's nowhere to bolt onto the steering head, but the DR does have that capability. Of course, then you're adding a bunch of weight up front, which maybe isn't the greatest. Maybe I'll try a few things first and then go to the rally tower. I don't know. Either way though, I think keeping the wind off of the majority of your body, even if it doesn't protect against your helmet getting bashed around by the wind, keeping that wind off of you does make a big difference. And both of these bikes I rode about an hour home when I traded and purchased them. And I've got to say, as cold as it was on that ride, it wasn't maybe quite as bad as I think I had it built up in my head to be. But I will say that now that I've got wind protection on this bike, I do feel like it's a lot more enjoyable to ride, just because you're not always constantly getting shook around. And sure, it's just a little bit of wind, but if it's just a little bit of wind moving you around the entire time you're on the bike, it doesn't make for a great long-term experience. And sure, it's nice to have the airflow in the summertime, but if I'm off-road working hard anyways, I'm pretty much always standing up, so then I get the airflow anyhow. So for me, wind protection is just a must. It of course gives me the place to put that GPS or CarPlay unit or whatever. It's just something that I've kind of gotten used to and really do like. The other thing that I did to both my KLRs and the Tenere 700 and the TW200 that I have not yet got to on both of these bikes, but we will be getting to very soon, is some sort of auxiliary lighting. And as nice as just a regular old LED headlight like I put in here from Tusk just the other day, as much as that extra illumination is nice for both your low and your high beam, it's still just never really enough for me. In a place like Wisconsin where we've got just deer everywhere ready to jump out, it's super nice to have a little bit more fill than just the headlight can provide. No matter how bright a headlight is, I still always like to have a little bit of extra fill for the ditches. That's also just really nice for off-road because then you get the light right down below the bike so you can see the rocks and the obstacles when you're trail riding at night. It's nice because you can see up into the trees a bit and off to the sides in the woods. I mean, it just makes for a much more enjoyable, nicer experience at night and sort of turns night into daytime almost, which is why I really liked the lights that I had on the KLR most recently. I mean, I really think that was probably the best setup that I've had so far. I'm hoping that we can do something similar or maybe even better on both of these bikes. It usually doesn't take too much, especially on bikes like these where you can put a brighter headlight bulb in that actually has less draw on it. So this, I think, came with a 55, 60 watt bulb, where the Tusk bulb that's in it now, even though it puts out more light, I think it only pulls 35 watts. So in other words, you're basically cutting that draw in half, meaning you've got the rest of that left, probably plus some, since I think this has a 10 amp fuse that I believe is just for the headlight. You've basically got the ability then to just wire in a set of auxiliary lights directly to the high beam circuit, meaning you can just steal power right from behind the headlight. You don't have to mess with any switches or anything. You just turn the high beam on, the high beam headlight comes on, the pod lights come on, you turn it back off, they go off along with the high beam. It's really slick. We've done that on my dad's bike. That's what I've got done on the TW. And I think that is what I'm going to do with both of these. It's just stupid simple. It works great. I mean, you just have to do a few calculations and make sure that you're not trying to draw too much amperage through the fusing and the wiring. Of course, don't upgrade your fusing because the wires are what dictate the fuse size. But with just a little bit of background knowledge and just a few connections, I mean, it makes bikes like this so much nicer to ride at night. So I think that's definitely one that I think is definitely important, and I think a lot of people maybe don't take the time to investigate or to do just because they don't want to do any wiring. But there's lots of how-to videos out there. I'll be putting some out on both of these bikes. If you guys are interested, I'd love to have you subscribe and watch along each week. There's a lot of other things that I'll be doing to these bikes. We'll be doing heated hand grips on both of these, as well as heated seats, which will be a first for me, and I think will be kind of cool and fun to test out this winter. There's definitely a lot of other things. A lot of people like the double take mirrors. I've got the fake ones on the 701. That stuff is sort of nice, but this was kind of just bare bones what I would really be annoyed, or what I have, I guess, been annoyed, or what I'm still annoyed by every time that I get on these bikes. And of course, depending on the bike and the rider, everybody's preferences are a little bit different depending on where you're gonna ride, how often you're gonna ride on road versus off. That's all gonna change. But I think all of those things are probably things that would help most people. And if you think that I'm wrong, if you think that some of the stuff that I think is important is not important, I'd love to hear your reasoning down in the comments section. Other than that, guys, take care, stay safe, stay swanky, get out and enjoy this beautiful world on your motorcycle. No matter how far your build is along, even if it's stock, get out there and run it and enjoy this beautiful world God created. Thanks for watching. If you can't get out and enjoy it right now, here's some more videos to check out in the meantime.